welcome to the December meeting of the Scrutiny for Communities. I'll get the most important business of the day out of the way first, and thank Councillor Hazel Prior-Sankey for bringing in cakes today. They are most welcome, much appreciated, and they're at the back of the room for those that are here in the room. Unfortunately, for those of you online, you will not be able to partake, but that's just life, I'm afraid. Anyway, on to the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Can I check that everybody is able to hear within the room and online, please? Not getting anything about that. Thumbs up. Great. Thank you, Bob. The agenda pack with papers is available via mod.gov or directly from the council website from the link that was sent out to members. When I invite someone to speak, could you please clearly state who you are for the benefit of anybody who's listening to the meeting online so they can identify who you are. I'd also like to warmly welcome any members of the public and media who are joining us today. There are no planned fire drills, and if the alarm does sound, please follow the Democratic Service officers out of the building. This meeting is being recorded by the council and will be placed online later on. Finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to the page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding appropriate information when raising queries or points. Thank you. Right, Jamie, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. Just before I do apologies, I just wanted to comment on the car parking situation, which quite a few members have fed back to me on this morning. Just looking on Dragon's Pen, which is the newsletter sent round to everybody, maintenance work is due to start on the 4th of December in the Well car park to improve drainage. Whilst this takes place, the Well car park will be closed to all vehicles for 4 weeks. Accessible spaces will be kept free at the front of B block for anyone who needs to use them, but everyone else who would normally park in the Well area will need to use the white spaces around Shire Hall, avoiding the numbered spaces nearest the car park hut opposite the entrance of the court, as these are reserved spaces. The contractor has been asked to make sure that there is always a clear walkway so you can still access the AB link on foot. I do understand that there hasn't been any separate comms sent to councillors, so I will ensure that is done today for other members, but I do apologise for any inconvenience that is causing. Back to the original point, apologies for absence, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Aulia, from Councillor Hart, Councillor Duddridge and Councillor Pearce.
Okay, thank you. There's an audit committee meeting here in the morning and I suspect those members may appreciate a separate email. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting, they have been circulated. Are there any queries on them or are you content that they are an accurate record? Any questions, please? Okay, may I have a proposer to accept them? Thank you, Edric, and a seconder, Andy Kendall. And all those in favour? Right. Passed, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to today's meeting? They're not the standard ones. No. Okay. For the benefit of Councillor Ham and Councillor Power, who've just arrived, there are cakes at the back of the room if you're feeling peckish. Yes, sorry, Councillor Cravens.
Just in case when we get onto, we have got fees and this one, haven't we, as well? Yeah. Just point out that it's in my registered interest, but I do pay various fees to the council, but I think it's a personal interest rather than a judicial one. So just thought I'd bring that up now rather than remember halfway through the meeting, like I have done the last couple of times.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, just for clarity. Good. Jamie, item 4. Are there any public questions?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we will now move on to item 5, and I'm very must apologise to the committee, and Jamie also apologises that the outcome tracker is not available for today's meeting. It is, however, very close to being finalised and will be circulated in the next couple of days. Is that right, Jamie?
That is correct, Chair, and apologies, committee. Thank you.
Right, moving swiftly on, we now move on to item 6, which is the report on this year's Glastonbury Festival. So I'll invite Sarah Dowden and Dave Coles to present the update to members, and then we'll go on to questions. So, All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I've done a brief PowerPoint presentation just so I can go through and summarise the main points. So I'll just get that shared on screen now. Okay, so yeah, let me just move the PowerPoint down one slide. That's it. So the purpose of the report is to provide an overview of regulatory services monitoring of the 2025 Glastonbury Festival. It provides a summary of compliance with licensing and environmental health requirements, and also provides a summary of the work of the other Somerset Council teams, such as traffic management, public health, civil contingencies, and the children's safeguarding team. And it details a new members protocol for Glastonbury Festival, which we're hoping to implement from 2027. Very quick bit of background. You probably know all this anyway, because we've brought this report a couple of times in the last couple of years. So event dates are this year were from the 25th of June to the 29th of June. The licence is issued by Somerset Council, so we issue a licence under our various licensing regimes under Licensing Act 2003 for them to have the event. And that licence gives them the ability to have up to 210,000 people on site. The licence authorises one event per year, and the licence is made up of an operating schedule, which contains conditions for promoting the licensing objectives. And then sitting underneath the operating schedule is an event management plan, which shows how Glastonbury Festival will comply with the operating schedule conditions to promote the licensing objectives. So if we start with the work of regulatory services. So licensing the event, the licensee has to promote 4 licensing objectives as part of running their event and part of the licensing requirements. Those are listed there. So it's prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and protection of children from harm. Prior to the event taking place, there's a lot of pre-licensing work that happens, or pre-event licensing work, I should say, that happens. The event management plan is submitted and it's scrutinised by a multi-agency partnership of professionals from various organisations, including the police, Avon and Somerset Constabulary, NHS, Somerset Council Highways, various departments within the council. So there is full scrutiny of the event management plan prior to the event. And this year, and as if every year, all required documents were submitted on time and accepted by the multi-agency partnership and licensing authority. So it's not something that just happens. It doesn't, they don't just have a license issued every year and we just let them get on with it. There is a event management plan, and again, that is reviewed every year by multi-agency partnership to make sure that it is consistent with what they need to do to promote the licensing objectives, and that if there's any learning from previous events, that is incorporated into event management plans for sort of upcoming events. Event monitoring. So as in 2024, we had some staff changes. Obviously, the council was going through a restructure last year. So we did, at the beginning of this year. So there were some changes to staffing, and some of the leads or the lead area group officers. So for example, people who deal with health and safety and so forth, and crowd management, they changed over because of the restructure. That didn't affect our ability to deliver the event. We still had a lot of experienced members of staff, and obviously the staff that filled in those gaps this year, from as others had left, were experienced members of staff in the areas that they were operating in. Again, in 2025, we've looked at staff and resource efficiencies, bearing in mind that we're in a financial emergency, or have been in a financial emergency. We've been looking at how we, over the last couple of years, refine, I suppose, our use of resources for monitoring the event. This year, we monitored, as with all years, for licensing, compliance with licensing, public safety, food safety, private water supplies, and noise and nuisance. A bit more on the resources. Like I said, we continue to review the resources in 2025. In 2024, we achieved a 41% reduction in resources required to monitor the event compared with 2023. In 2025, we did further efficiencies, and some of the measures that we implemented included removing a council shuttle bus system. We used to have a system of getting staff on and off site where we used a council vehicle, a sort of council shuttle bus to come in and out of site because of the it was felt this was a legacy from Mendip. It was felt the best way of getting people on and off site. We looked at that and felt we didn't need to do that this year. We had adequate parking available to us on site. We'd obviously reduced significantly down over the years the number of staff working and monitoring the event. So we felt we could operate without that shuttle bus service. That obviously saves resources from within the council. We combined some of the teams together, so things like the health and safety and the crowd monitoring teams were combined as one. And we did more targeted on-site licensing monitoring, targeting high-risk areas rather than sort of blanket approaches that might have been used in the past. And we also completely eliminated hire vehicles and associated costs with that. In previous years, hire vehicles have been used for getting staff around site and monitoring teams on and off site and to the areas they needed to monitor. This year, we resourced that entirely from council-owned and operated vehicles. So these efficiencies have resulted in, again, in 2025, compared with 2024, a 23% officer time or officer resource saving. By eliminating completely the hire vehicles, we've saved another 1.8k by just using council in-house vehicles. So the total monitoring cost this year for monitoring the live event was 24,800. And that's a 25% saving versus 2024. The statutory licence fee is £32,300, and that is set. That's not something we can sort of modify. That is effectively set by government and set via a calculation that is set down in legislation. Even with these reductions in resources, we were able to deliver the required monitoring work. And we were able to deliver all the monitoring we needed to do as we have done in previous years, but obviously by utilising less resources. A quick summary of the monitoring outcomes. The festival was well run. There were no serious issues or incidents occurred. Overall compliance with licensing conditions was observed and no formal action has been required. There were a couple of issues raised, and some of this came out of and I'll talk about this a bit later on, a councillor engagement group. We did have a few complaints about some off-site campsites or a off-site campsite during the festival, which we're investigating at the moment. That festival site is not, or that campsite is not owned or operated by Glastonbury Festivals. It's operated entirely by a third party, so it's not something that Glastonbury Festivals can deal with. It's not their event. And we had some complaints about helicopters, but as I've said at previous scrutinies, that's really an issue for the Civil Aviation Authority to look at that. We haven't got any powers to deal with noise from helicopters within environmental health. There's always a review and debrief process. So after the event, and there is a review of how things went. Officers, not just regulatory services, but people in highways, etc., and other organisations such as the NHS, Public Health, and so forth, will feed back into Glastonbury Festival of any lessons learned or anything that we think that we could improve on for the next event. That is fed back to Glastonbury Festival, so that what we're aiming for is continuous improvement. Not saying there's anything wrong with any events that have taken place, but obviously there is always ability to modify things to make things slightly better. If we just have a quick look at the work of some of the other teams, we have got Bev from Highways or from the traffic management team on the call as well, in case there's any questions about the highways issues. So there's a brief introduction here as to what the the traffic management team's role is, and that's in summary to approve the traffic management plan produced by Glastonbury Festival, ensure the traffic management plan is appropriate and meets the objectives in reducing congestion and maintaining safety on the public highway network. and they also monitor the implementation of the traffic management plan during the duration of the festival by having people within the event monitoring centre or event control centre, so that they can monitor and react to issues as they occur on the highway network. Summary of the work of the traffic management team. It was a successful traffic management operation this year, was driven by careful plan and teamwork between Somerset Council, the organisers and service providers. So again, as with the regulatory services work, there's a lot of pre-preparation work that takes place with highways and the event organisers to make sure that this plan, which is it's a significant number of people they've got to get on and off site, is appropriate, and basically everyone knows what they're doing and it's implemented appropriately. The plan allowed 210,000 visitors to access the site efficiently with minimal disruption. They deployed the use of intelligent transport systems, things like variable message signs, CCTV and ANPR cameras to allow them to real-time monitor. So a lot of the work is obviously, like I say, monitoring traffic flows as the festival progresses and making sure that they can tweak those traffic routes or whatever they need to do. I'm not an expert on planning, but obviously or highways, but that they can react to things as they occur and make sure that the traffic keeps flowing smoothly throughout particularly in the opening day of the festival and obviously the closing day of the festival. And the collaborative approach and use of advanced technologies were key to success. So like I say, the pre-preparation work is really important in this, and across all the areas that work within or were involved with the Glastonbury Festival, that the work with the organisers prior to the event is key to the success of any plans that are implemented. Other teams, so Somerset Council Public Health, they've got a statutory role to protect population from health, infectious diseases, environmental hazards, chemical and radiological threats. So they've got a statutory role to do this. What a lot of it is their business as usual. They're doing this all the time within in their day-to-day jobs. This is just scaled up for the event, for the the vast number of people on site. There is obviously risks there associated with public health, and those guys are there to work with the organisers to make sure that any risks are mitigated as far as possible, and there's plans in place to deal with anything that happens. Past plans that they produced are things to do with SARS, avian flu, and this year they did a bit of an additional risk focus on contamination of illegal drug supply. Not that there was any specific issues with that, but it was an area they wanted to look at, because I think there's been issues at maybe other festivals and so forth across the country. And what they did with that was that they strengthened the response plans in the lead up to the festival. But during the festival, there was no escalation needed. There were no issues with that, with contamination of drug supplies or anything like that. So the plans are in place should they be needed, but they weren't needed as a result of the event this year. There was an amber heat alert. I think it was on the closing days of the festival, the last day of the festival, and that was they put various mitigations in to assist with that. It's obviously quite a high risk if you've got hundreds of thousands of people trying to get off of a site in the middle of a heat wave. So plans are there to react to things like that, and mitigations were put in place, and that was a successful operation during the egress from the site. So public health, 3 phases of work. So like all the other teams, they're involved in the planning, in the lead up to the festival, responding, so being on site, being able to respond to any emerging public health issues. And again, in the debrief sessions, they will, like all the other teams, provide information to Glastonbury Festival of anything, any learning, etc., or any issues that they think might be worth considering for the next event. Children's safeguarding. So the children's safeguarding team had a role. The local authority education safeguarding lead attended the monthly multi-agency meetings. So in the run-up to the festival, we have monthly meetings with the organisers to run through plans, to identify issues and so forth. So children's safeguarding were involved in that. They met with festival safety and safeguarding leads to confirm child welfare policies, to make sure that the relevant policies are in place. They reviewed policies. They updated or made sure that the festival organisers are up-to-date referral routes, contact details for the various organisations involved in children's safeguarding. And they attended on-site pre-festival briefings to provide further advice and for further assurance. Some of the things that Glastonbury Festival had in place, this is just a summary, was year-round. They've got a year-round safeguarding lead for on-site and an on-site child safeguarding consultant. They've got dedicated safeguarding and welfare support teams during the live shows. There's people on site that are there to specifically do child safeguarding and welfare. They've got comprehensive induction and training for all the staff that work on the site and the volunteers, and they provide quick reference guides to members of site staff. They have safeguarding champions in each area as points of contact, so that if there's any queries or any concerns, that there is people there with, I suppose, advanced knowledge of these sorts of matters to be able to provide further advice. They have family-specific camping areas, so areas where are dedicated specifically to family camping with dedicated stewarding and monitoring to make sure that those areas are being used for what they should be being used for. They have strong communication links with obviously the external agencies and other stakeholders involved in safeguarding. And there's clear guidance on child restricted areas, publicised on site and via festival website and app. So there'll be areas on site where it's not appropriate necessarily for children to go. Those are monitored by stewards and so forth, making sure that people are adhering to the rules. Civil contingencies, again, they're involved in the pre-planning of the event. It's a big event. Should there be an emergency, then obviously it's going to be a significant issue potentially to deal with. So there's a lot of pre-planning from emergency planning that goes into that, advising Glastonbury Festival of their plans, but also making sure that as a council, we are prepared in the event that an emergency occurs. So that was all done prior to the event. During the festival, the emergency planners operate on site. There is an emergency planner on site and a call-out rota as well, should there be an incident. They co-locate with our tactical officers. So during the festival, I'm a tactical officer. So we have a rota for tactical officers to be there should anything happen, and to ensure that our staff are, should any escalations be needed, that there is a appropriate level of authority, I suppose, and management on site. So the emergency planners are there as well. That's an advantage in that should an incident occur, they are there on hand to be able to provide specific advice that we may need in any response that's required. So that's all the work of the various teams and monitoring and so forth. I've got it's just a couple more slides now on some other issues that came out. One of the issues that came out of the scrutiny last year about council engagement, and there's just a little bit on the members protocol, which is attached as Appendix 1 to the report. So council engagement group, at the last scrutiny committee in October last year, it was raised that we needed to have better engagement with our local members, in that we should be utilising some of their knowledge as well, being local to the areas, to what some of the concerns might be of members of the public and so forth, or their constituents in those areas, and also to ensure that they have the necessary briefing to advise the people within their areas if should there be any questions, and they know the escalation routes and so forth. So we established a council engagement group, and that included the following councillors that are listed on the PowerPoint slide there. A pre-festival meeting was held in April, so we had a meeting before the festival where we sat down with the councillors that attended and briefed them on what was up and coming, and they obviously had the opportunity to raise any issues with us or request information and so forth. So we did that prior to the festival, and then we had a post-festival debrief in September, again with the councillors that attended, provided us with any issues that they felt we needed to pick up on for future events and so forth. And that's where some of I think the issue again was raised about a off-site campsite, which had caused some concern to some members of the public or some local residents, and also the issue around helicopters. So we picked up on that. I think it was really useful actually having that councillor briefing, particularly both before and after the festival, because it does give a really good link into the local community concerns, and obviously gives a good link back for members to advise their constituents. So I thought that was really, that really was actually a good thing that came out of the last year's scrutiny committee. So I've covered that one off. Members protocol. So in Appendix 1, you'll see that there is a new members protocol being proposed for the 2027 event. This is designed to allow councillors that need to have access to the site to have access in a controlled way, in a way that allows them to access what they need to access. So that's proposed to be implemented from 2027. The full document is in Appendix 1, and I assume people have read that. So yeah, it's just designed to ensure that there is access where required, and that access is allows then the best ability to monitor things like the work of the licensing team, or for example the work of the highways team, the work that Somerset Council does as part of the event. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Dave. That was very good. Very comprehensive. Are there any members here who would? I see Claire's online. Are any members in the room? Wes Reed, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dave. Very good presentation. Just come back to you mentioned the helicopter noise, etc. A couple of times in your report. I did mention. I remember going back over a year ago now. We had a parish councillor, I think, from Pilton here, obviously representing that. As one of the things he brought up as well. And I suggested, well, can it not be discussed with the CAA, with the organisers, etc., and try to find another location nearby, which will mitigate a bit of that, really. But I haven't read any more as to what was done or whether any approach had been made. Thank you.
So there was so for this year there were changes to the location of the helicopter, of the helipads, I think, and the routes they were coming in. But I think obviously, I suppose if you change the route, then it affects other people, doesn't it? But they have tried to implement some measures for this year's festival to see if there's anything they can do. It's something we can pick up again for the 2027 event to see if there's anything further that can be done to mitigate that.
Right, thank you. Tom, please, and then Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if it's for this meeting or for another meeting, but I remember at full council, I believe it was in the summer, I asked about the comments that were made on stage at Glastonbury that were broadcasted by the BBC, and they said they were going to get back to me with a police investigation because it was going on that. But I don't think I've had a sufficient response from that at the moment. So if I could get that possible, if it's available, that would be good, if that's possible. Thank you.
Is that within our remit, really?
It's an ongoing police investigation, so I don't really. I'm not necessarily going to comment on that at the moment. I can message Avon and Somerset Police and see if there is an update for anyone, but obviously it's their investigation. They would need to decide what updates they can provide.
No, because I suppose that the point is that if there is, shall we say, unlawful activity in and around the festival, which is the responsibility of the festival to control and to manage, but it fails to do so adequately, then presumably that kind of thing would come into considerations of granting a license. Would that be something that we would consider when granting a license if we felt they weren't fully in control of whatever it was that was causing a problem?
I think it would depend on obviously what the I mean, I don't really want to comment at the moment because this isn't in general, I think we do have to take into account these sorts of factors in granting a license. They've obviously got a license granted already, and our current understanding is that they don't appear to have breached any, Glastonbury Festival don't appear to have breached any licence conditions themselves. And obviously the police investigation is a separate matter, and they will need to obviously determine what action they want to take on that as a police authority, and I suppose as a responsible authority under the various licensing acts and so forth.
Yeah, okay. I mean, clearly it's a grey area and a question of fact and degree, but it's something. Yeah, Tom, did you want to come back?
I'm just saying it's being a grey area for a very long time now. It's taking the. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
All right, thank you for that. Andy Kendall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Two simple questions. The acronyms, I'm trying to work it out. GFLA, Glastonbury Festival.
Glastonbury Festival Events Limited.
What, sorry?
Glastonbury Festival Events Limited.
And UKHSA.
UK Health Security Agency. I have to think about that one myself.
Yeah, okay. So I've been trying to work it out, and I'm close, but I'm not close enough. Just one final question. There's 200,000 people licensed per site. Could you just give a briefing, just very briefly, just tell me, how do you actually know there's 210, no less, no more there? How is that?
They obviously, the festival issue.
Yeah.
There's a limited number of tickets they issue, and they monitor people on and off site the whole time. So if you go onto sites with a ticket, you're clocked in. If you go off site, you're clocked back out again. So there is only enough tickets sold to allow them not to breach the 210,000 limit.
Just to come back on one, Chair. So I understand all that. So there's no gate crashes or nothing like that going on, no?
I mean, okay, I think we've all probably seen on the news occasionally people try and climb over the fence. They have got a comprehensive security arrangements to capture these people when they try to climb over the fence. And if they do, we're confident that the numbers of people that are trying to climb over the fence would not breach the festival limit, and basically they're all caught anyway, pretty much when they land the other side. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I've got Marcus Travis, please, and I'll go to Lee and then Claire.
Got to me already. Yeah, it was a couple of things actually. Because you talked about the fact we managed to reduce costs by not having as many officers there. And I mean, I did attend the tour a couple of years back, contrary to I've never actually attended the festival, contrary to what it says on my public register of interest. For some reason, that seems to suggest I accepted a free ticket, but I never did. But I went on the guided tour, and I thought before the event started, and obviously it's quite impressive. And when you're looking at an event that size, actually, what role as council officers do you feel you're actually having? Do you think you actually have an input? Actually, when they're that big, that professional, we assume they know what they're doing. So do we feel that actually we could cut that cost down further? But then on the other side, the fact that the fee is only £32,500, where actually I don't know what other fund, I'm not going to go and delve into the fees charges, but it is actually clearly bonkers that it's governed by statute of being limited to £32,000 when you talk about, I don't know how many tickets that equates to, probably about 1,000, does it? A bit more. So is there anything we can do nationally, or has there ever been anything, does the licensing, not the license, there's a licensing association there, or Institute of Licensing Association. Have we ever tried and speak to central government and get that changed? Because it just seems clearly another burden on this council that actually defeats, we argue about fees being cost related. It probably defeats the object of the exercise. So yeah, I suppose there's two questions. And the other question I've got is, with regard to the off-site campsite, have we got any powers over that? Because obviously, if it's a pop-up one that's planning, then have we actually got any powers over that? Is there anything we can do, or is that something that we need to let the festival organisers deal with? I'll leave it. I mean, there's obviously economic benefits to this festival that are probably astounding, but I've never actually heard a figure what that economic benefit is, which would be quite nice to know. But yeah, I'll leave it at those two questions, if I may. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think we do make a difference being on site. We, take the noise side of things. We have teams going out auditing to make sure that they are complying with their license conditions. We've got teams advising them on things like health and safety and things like private water supplies. They've got a huge private water supply distribution system on site that we have teams going out and checking things, auditing, I suppose, making sure that that nothing's been missed. We can't obviously audit absolutely everything, but it's providing, I suppose, members of the public, festival goers, yourselves with confidence that this massive event with a lot of risks is being managed appropriately by Glastonbury Festival. So I think that's the first thing. In terms of cutting costs further, I think we're probably at the limit now, maybe, as to where we can reduce it down to, because I think you can cut it too much, and then it's, it becomes unmanageable and it won't work properly. So I think we're probably at a limit to what we can do there. In terms of the licensing fee, that's set nationally. There's not really a lot we can do about that. That would require a change of the legislation or regulations relating to those types of fee calculations. So I don't think there's specifically anything we can do about that unless the government decides to, or the Secretary of State, whichever one, whoever's responsible for that specific aspect decides to make that change. And in terms of the pop-up campsite, this will have had something called a temporary event notice, so we can look at that for next year, or not next year, for the next event in 2027, and establish whether there is anything to suggest that shouldn't occur, or if there are issues that have occurred that can, if there's mitigations that can be put in, then we can try to work with those organisers to ensure that we try to mitigate that. I mean, what is happening with that? Although Glastonbury Festival aren't responsible for it, they are going to try to assist with us in looking at what the issues were and whether there's anything that can be done to assist with that. So I think that answers that one.
And apologies if it's buried in the report on the information, but so obviously we saved 23. So there must be a net cost. So what does the festival actually cost this council with regard to offset? Because you've got savings there. So if the fee's 32,000, what would you do? I presume we have a figure somewhere what the actual cost to this council is.
So the cost of regulatory services is whatever that 23. I can't remember what's in the report. That will be that. Yeah, 24.5 to monitor the event. I know highways get all of their fees paid as part of their agreement. So that is all cost recovery from highways. Public health, they will, to a certain extent, they've got a statutory role to do that. And I think as a council, things like civil contingencies are there really for our benefit. I mean, you could say, well, we won't have them there, but actually, I think as a risk to the council, not, for example, having civil contingencies available on site, and some major incident to occur, and we've got to try and ring people up and try and get them on site and stuff like that. That could leave us very exposed as a local authority, and members of people going to that site, festival goers exposed if we weren't able to respond appropriately to that. So I think we are the costs are pretty much covered by the licensing fee and obviously other arrangements for things like highways.
Thanks. I mean, on that basis, I was going to ask some questions, so this seems to be the right time to do it. Whilst I appreciate the direct costs associated with the festival are likely to be covered by the license fee, there's a huge amount of work. I mean, if we were having one next June, you'd be working on it now. So there's a huge amount of work on both ends of the festival as well as the middle. And I mean, there are two things, and this has been, I think, a concern for this committee for some years now. Not only the costs in labour, as it were, man days or person days that take. But it's also, if you're having to deal with that, then you're not doing something else. So how it all fits in with the general work program and to what extent it has a knock-on effect with our day-to-day work, I think is something that's really, particularly as we find this council in straitened times. So do we employ any temporary staff as partial cover while professional officers are dealing with the Glastonbury Festival, both before, during and after?
No, we don't. There's no additional costs like that. I think ultimately it is part of, it's like anything. It is, to a certain extent, it's business as usual. It's an event. It is a licensable event. There's food hygiene issues there and so forth. So it's effectively part of our workload. The fact that we get a license fee for it is, I suppose, a bonus in that we don't get license fees for just going around and inspecting normal food premises and so forth. So what we try to do, and this is why we've been shrinking the size of and reducing down the size of the staff resources involved, is we try to make it have as minimal effect as possible in terms of other work. So whilst there's rotas in place, for example, so that we haven't got the entire environmental health department up there for the whole week. There's rotas. So for example, you'll have, say, 2 food officers on at a time on a rota. So there's always a pool of staff out doing other work. So we try to do that, rotate it round so the individual members of staff aren't overburdened and there. So for example, if they've got an area of work they do specialise in within a team, that area of work isn't overly compromised by by them having to overcommit to this. So we have a rota in place, and like I say, to a certain extent, it is business as usual. It is part of our required work. So things like the food hygiene inspections, they will be up there doing those inspections. But there's a lot of traders that are registered in Somerset that may, for example, only trade at Glastonbury Festival. So actually, we are doing again that business as usual work while we're there.
I mean, notwithstanding the fact it's a massive global event that's just happens to be here. So anyway, thank you. Lee Redmond, please.
Thank you, Chair. A few points. I'll start off with a bit of background, really. Councillor Cravis mentioned about the financial benefit that we find that it brings to the town, and I've spoken to the area. I think an important point just to highlight some of the reason why Bridgewater Carnival is able to be as big as it is because of the work that the carnival clubs do in and around the Glastonbury and the benefit that they have around the festival. It's the carnival clubs do a lot of security work around there and other things like that, and the money that's earned through the festival is then reinvested in the carnival. So some of the reason Bridgewater Carnival is the biggest illuminated carnival in the world, I can say that because I live there, is because of the benefit of the festival. I've been in and around the festival one way or another for more than 40 years, and I've seen how it's changed and it's got better all the time. So that was the bit from there. So I'll start with my comments. So I want to commend the work of officers and everyone in relation to what goes on around the festival. I think this report shows how things have progressed. Some of the reason why I wanted to speak today is one of my campaigns is around safeguarding issues, particularly around young people in and around the festival. And I welcome the feedback from the comments there, the comments in the report. And I think the fact that we've progressed things greatly, it does give me some confidence in that. And it would be wrong if I didn't commend people for that, because I've been on it for a few years now. But the bit that Councillor Cravis and yourself have highlighted, and I think for me is one of the biggest risks, is the fact that off-site facilities and events are becoming more concerning. The festival is run in such a regimented and legislated way that's fine, but that doesn't. The question I have, and as Councillor Cravis highlighted and yourself, Chair, I think the off-site venues are becoming more of a risk, because anyone that has looks at the way the festival boundary is well secured, the directly associated things are well secured. It's the off-site camping that's the concern. There are it's welcoming that most of them, I would be interested to understand the percentage that cover the get 10s licenses, temporary event notices for those periods. But my question is, is it a risk that needs to be highlighted and with a couple of exclamation marks after it, and how we start dealing with those going forward, Chair?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because presumably the people at the off-site sites must have tickets, so that otherwise they wouldn't be there unless they just listening to the music over the wind. But if they're all under a temporary event notice, I mean, that presumably implies a lighter touch from this authority.
First thing to say is that this year we Glastonbury Festival organised a briefing for off-site campsites. So there was a specific briefing, not just ones that they are associated with, but all off-site campsites. Officers from regulatory services attended that and provided advice and guidance and on the various aspects of what they should be doing in terms of, noise nuisance or safeguard, whatever the issues were. So they provided that information to them. I think they are issued with a temporary event notice, and throughout the festival we will go out and check various off-site campsites to make sure that they're complying and provide advice and guidance. If they don't comply and if they cause a massive issue, then obviously that temporary event notice, if they apply for another one in the future, it can be with, people could object to that, or regulatory services could object to that. So there is controls in place. I think the idea is that, I mean, it is part of the government, the licensing act. The temporary event notices are there for temporary events. I mean, these guys aren't there, those off-site campsites now won't operate for nearly 2 years because the next festival is not in 2 years' time. So that's the point of having the temporary event system, is it's a efficient way of doing it whilst there is still oversight. They've still got to comply and promote the licensing objectives, as have Glastonbury Festival got to, but obviously they haven't got a continuous license to do that. In some respects, it's quite a good system, because actually, if when these issues are investigated after this event, or a off-site campsite causes problems, then there is that ability to object to it and require them not to have they've got to reapply for the license, haven't they? I think what's worth mentioning is obviously the temporary event notices, the off-site campsites aren't part of Glastonbury Festival, and I think I said that in the presentation. They are a separate, they're separate operators. They are, if I owned a big field near Glastonbury Festival, I could probably apply for a temporary event notice and run a campsite if I got the relevant planning permissions and so forth to do that. So they're not linked to the festival. They're not operated by the festival, and these are all individual operators. So, but I think the temporary event notice, that, like I say, they've still got to comply with the license, promoting the licensing objectives.
Yeah. Okay. Lee, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, just some clarification, really. Okay. So temporary event licenses are applied for and issued. So are we saying that attached to those are children and young people's safeguarding policies, which are being required to be adhered to?
They will be checked for comply. We send officers out to do compliance checks. In terms of safeguarding, I don't know 100% on that. I know that next year that they are looking to do some more briefings on that at these off-site campsite, well, not for next year, in 2 years' time, for the where they've set these off-site briefing sessions up. They're looking to have more input into that from child safeguarding. So that is something which is on the agenda, and that we will be looking at to make sure that there are, you're raising valid points, that there are no areas where there's gaps in oversight. So yeah, that is part of the agenda going forward.
Chair, sorry, just quickly.
Yes,
could I ask then that the children and young people's safeguarding policies are highlighted as a risk in relation to off-site parking specifically, and going forward, can I ask for consideration to be put in place particularly for, well, not necessarily just for the festival, for anything really in the event, that children and young people's safeguarding policies are considered as part of a licence application. I know they are in a lot of cases, but I think in this particular issue, the fact that the things have been done so well, we want to continue that exemplar across the off-sites as well as the on-sites.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I don't know whether it's possible for these off-sites to be age limited under the licensing arrangements, or whether but clearly there's a risk here, and it sounds as if the festival as a whole inside the fence has got it buttoned up pretty well.
I think it's useful to know as well is that the TENs only generally relate to the area where they're selling alcohol. So you could have a campsite which will, with X number of spaces on it. The 10 is for the sale, and we don't issue to every event for the campsite. So they can have, there will be age restricted policies in terms of purchase of alcohol and so forth on these sites, but that's what the 10 covers, is the sale of alcohol where the alcohol consumption takes place. And we do have officers going out, licensed officers do go out and check those sites while the festival's operating, and also they have attended these briefing sessions that were held with the off-site campsite people prior to the event. So advice has been given there, and then officers do go out and check compliance to make sure that where there are, for example, if you've got a campsite where there's families camping and there's an area with a small bar or something, that those children are not accessing, there's the relevant controls in place to safeguard children.
Claire Sully online, you've been very patient.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me okay, Chair?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Sorry, I've just got some notes, right. Bear with me. Okay, so thank you very much. I pushed for more officer engagement with the local councillors, so we weren't, make it clear, we weren't deliberately left out, and I think it was a hang-up from the transition from Mendip District Council to Somerset Council for the festival being managed, and so that couldn't have been easy with the unitary being established. The Somerset Council officers have an incredible amount of work they're covering in their role, and Glastonbury is obviously massive, but it isn't all they do. And the report on the whole is positive, and that, I think that's a testament of the team working and shared expertise with GFL and the Somerset Council. It does help us to be informed, and I would suggest a council-wide briefing, because people and members often focus on the bright lights or the controversy and can miss the nuances of the multi-agency work, the risks, and the economic impact. As a local councillor, and its villages, it's a village, and its villages and rural area all around it, I get casework all year around. Sometimes it's to be a voice, answer questions and for Somerset Council, but I've also arranged meetings with the festival team and those with concerns. The concerns of off-site campsites and helicopters have been mentioned already, and solutions are always looked for. And the briefings have already been mentioned, and they were quite tough, those briefings on those campsites, about what the rights and the wrongs. And I know that there was one particular pop-up campsite that the village GFL and the village liaison are still dealing with now and making progress on to solving it and to not repeat the issues. Helicopters, there was a change of helicopter pathway, but of course, as was mentioned by the officer, by Dave, it did impact some residents, and I was on the phone to some residents in Evercreech, and I could hear the helicopters and their house was shaking. But again, I have confidence that Glastonbury Festival will look again to improve that, and it'll be a ongoing discussion. So local council is necessary, and we feed back to officers. we represent local people in our division who live there, live close by, as do I. And obviously Somerset Council has an important role in the festival, and it's all in it, and it's important to really understand how it works. And the behind the scenes is clearly very complex. And my experience as a festival team listen and always look to improve. My questions are, can we make it clear that councillors, local councillors, have a role? The numbers of us are minimum. There's only 2 local councillors, and I was only aware of a handful of councillors that were there. But we do have a role, and let's be positive about our purpose. And could we produce some helpful comms about our role and the impact of the festival for Somerset Council? That's the positive impact for Somerset Council, and the challenges. We just see the negative press, and that triggers people in public, and that leads to hate, and that leads to hate messages, which I received hate messages this year. And so this matters, that we are not hung out and or set up, a fair game. We're not. We're local people. We're local community champions. So my request this year is, can we have positive comms about our role while we were there, instead of what we have had, which is people being put out in public saying they've gone to the festival when they haven't, and then accusations around those who have gone to the festival that you're there for reasons that aren't part of our role. And I think this really, really matters, and it's something that's being missed at the moment, including talking about the economic impact. I don't favour cuts to Somerset Council and their role, because this is an enormous and important endeavour. As was mentioned, the local community organisations and charities, and the skills that get transferred. Some of the organisations involved in the festival over the years they're now the best in the world, and we have a festival that is the best in the world. So I do think there's that opportunity for comms and support of councillors, and please do not publicly say that councillors were there who weren't there. And I think that's been said during the scrutiny. So that's my ask this year, and I mean it in a real spirit of constructive and positivity. Thank you.
Yes, Chris Hall.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer all of it. If there is inaccurate comms going out in reference to councillors attending the event, then I don't know where they're coming from, and we can try and help clarify. You'll note that there's an appendix to this report which sets out the member protocol. So there is a change. We have tightened up on the way in which members will access the event for specific work-related activities for that support and oversight. So we're really clear. It's the first time I think we've published it in this fashion. So I think we're trying to be absolutely transparent about the role of members, and it is there to support the activity of the council, either in the monitoring arrangements or in the economic development inward investment arrangements. So I think it's the first time we've done it in this way, and obviously we can promote that. It's very clear who will get access and for what purpose. As I say, I'm not sure we've done it as clearly as that in the past, so hopefully that will assist.
Okay.
Can I come back, please, Chair?
Yes,
Sorry,
yes,
really, thank you, appreciate that. Yes, it is much better, but just to respond and say it gets declared as an interest for members who don't go, but who get offered tickets and who don't go, and then that goes straight into the press that they went to Glastonbury Festival taking tickets. And this year we had unfortunate press that had accusations of how we got those tickets. So I would say it came from Somerset Council that you put it on councillors' interest, declaration of interest, that they were offered tickets. Whereas I think it should be that it's only if they take the tickets, use the tickets. And there's so few councillors here that it should not. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where we're going with this one. Chris, and then Tom and Hazel want to have a word.
Yeah, just so we're all clear, if you are offered something, then it has to be declared, whether you accept it or otherwise, it has to be declared. I think what we're clarifying in the member protocol this year is that the phrase tickets gets used, and that implies that people have been handed a ticket that they can come and go as they please, and they can utilise it or pass it on in some way. So we're being really clear in the protocol that these are around access arrangements for members, not tickets. You will be escorted into and out of the site, be on site for a specific purpose, and that purpose will be established before your arrival. So we're being much clearer in how that happens. But just so we're all clear for members, if you are offered something, whether you take it or not, you're required to declare it.
Yeah, it's the council responsibility, isn't it? Tom and Hazel, did you want to come back on that very quickly, please?
It was only just about to say, that's what I just said. I thought was part of the constitution. That was all.
Hazel?
Thank you, Chair. I think when you fill in the register, don't you say this was offered and the date that it was taken, or there needs to be some way of saying I was offered those tickets, but I didn't go, I didn't take them, I didn't accept them. And in our press stuff, if somebody, I don't know whether it's the press are trawling through the interests at that time looking for those things, but if we're sending out comms saying these people have accepted these tickets, and I can't believe that we are, but actually it needs to be made clear, yes, these people were offered tickets, no, they didn't take them, or these people had access for specific purposes in relation to their role. I think we can be kinder to members in how we portray that interest. And I suspect it's the press picking it up from what people put on their interests and not clarifying. But yeah,
I would agree. I mean, clearly, it's members' responsibility to make sure their interests are up to date and clear. But equally, everybody needs to understand, not put 2 and 2 together and come up with 16 or something. I've got Edric, and then very briefly, Marcus.
Sorry, just a quick one around the TENS notice to the campsites. Do small campsites need that, or is that covered by that 28-day permitted development thing is it small sites under 40 pitches? I was just trying to read it quickly on here, but not use my phone too much. I'd like a response on that one, please, Dave.
Yeah, it's really the 10 that we issue is for if they're doing licensable activities like serving alcohol and so forth. So the actual camping side of things, that would be a planning issue, and I think there's probably a planning exemption for certain things. So, but what regulatory services issue is for licensable activities.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Very quickly, please.
I was going to come back just to what Claire was saying, because I was noting about council involvement, and of course, I suppose it's about political representation with an event of this size. And I know I'm looking at the map. I'm trying to think what it stands for, and obviously it's got all the professionals on it, but there's no political representation on that. And I think there's maybe there's lots of other instances that go on where the professionals in the room, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with the political representation as well. And I don't know whether maybe that should be looked at, whether that's too unusual to do, whether there should be some sort of political representation on that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're talking about a sort of operational group as opposed to a sort of steering group or oversight group, and I'm sure we can have a look at that. Right, thank you, members. We've had a pretty comprehensive, we've had a very good report from Dave, and we've had a fairly comprehensive debate. I think we should always remember that this is a global event, and it's not a national event; it's a global event. It goes all around the world and showcases Somerset. And we as an authority are responsible for making sure that is run legally, properly, safely, and all the other things. And it's certainly clear to me that the licensing team works incredibly hard together with its colleagues in highways and safeguarding and civil contingencies and the others to make sure that this is the case. It's very heartening to hear that we now have a full councillor board that is briefed, and local council representation is well aware of what's going on. That will no doubt strengthen. and we've heard about the benefits that this, just some of the benefits that this event does bring to the county. It would be quite nice if our economic development team could stick a finger in the air and work out just how much extra it does bring into Somerset. I think that would be really helpful. In terms of what we've just heard, I think there are clearly gaps, and there's obviously concern about the off-site camping, and how we can close the gaps in terms of safeguarding, particularly for children, and for better control of the activities, the other activities that go on there. I think we'll continue to look at that, and we've got 18 months to see what we can do to refine that. And I see from the chat that there are already plans to have meetings to see what we can do to lower the risks. And I think the final point I'd like to make is that, we rely on our staff to do these things. It's not optional. And Glastonbury is not the only festival in Somerset. I'm not quite sure how many there are, but there are several others that attract thousands of people, 3, 4, 5,000 people, which require the same level of diligence. It's not quite the same number of staff input, but they certainly require the same level of concern and diligence. And so my final thing is to make sure, and perhaps this is directed at the director sitting next to me, that environmental health and all the teams that deal with these things are adequately resourced, because we simply, particularly with a global event, we simply cannot afford to drop the ball based on lack of resources, which is the point I made about, do we get temporary staff in with this? And like it or not, I'm still not convinced. And environmental health costs may be covered by the license fee, but the rest of the stuff that this council puts in and around it, I would thought 32,000 is pretty much a drop in the ocean. So thank you everybody for your time and trouble. I think Dave and his team can now take a well-earned rest for about a year, I suppose, before it all starts kicking off again. So thank you all very much. Right. Moving on to item 7, which is the Home Finder report. We have Sam Wender-Nalira and with us today, and that will be followed up by the Seaward Bay report, and Stephen Boland is with for that. But Sam, would you like to kick off with the Home Finder, please?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. As Councillor Bill has just said, I'm Sam Wender-Nalira. I'm head of service prevention, Home Finder, and temporary accommodation for General Fund Housing. I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of Home Finder ahead of Stephen's presentation, hopefully just to give some context as to what Home Finder is, or just to remind everybody exactly the role that we have in Home Finder Somerset. So I've just popped it up on the screen so everyone can see it. So briefly how it works, Home Finder Somerset is a partnership between us as Somerset Council, the registered landlords that you will all know, and Homes in Somerset. And essentially we are there to work together to try and make finding an affordable home as simple as possible for all of our residents. So my team in the General Fund Housing assess all of the housing applications. We essentially administer the housing register in Somerset. So they use information provided by the customer and go through a very comprehensive policy that we have to decide what level of banding and the bedroom allowance for every applicant. All advertised properties, either from the council or from some of our partner providers, should be advertised on Home Finder Somerset. And I've popped a link into there's a brief guide to Home Finder Somerset in the slide pack here, so hopefully that should be shared around with everybody. So a bit about how it works. We have 2 main boards or groups in Home Finder Somerset. We've got a management and monitoring board, which is chaired, will be chaired by our service director, Kirsty Larkins, in the new year when it has its next management and monitoring board meeting. And has heavy involvement from myself, and we have to have 6 regular members in attendance made up of partner landlords and ourselves at Somerset Council. And there will be a choice-based lettings working group which is relaunching in January 2026 as well. You can see there then in the green boxes at the top, those are the different partners that feed into this, and the orange boxes on the right are the different documents that are relevant to Home Finder Somerset. So we have 4 levels of priority. We call these bands for Home Finder Somerset, starting at the bottom being bronze up to silver, gold and emergency band. There's a little bit of information on the slides there about what may constitute being in each band, but as with the previous slide where I put in the Home Finder guidance, there's a more comprehensive list should you wish to have a look at it outside of the meeting. Emergency band, I'll just touch on. We have very few. I think there's about 15 at any one point that constitute being an emergency band, and that is for really severe situations. I'll go through a few more slides, and there's a bit more information about how many are in each band. So just to give you an idea of trends, you can see that the housing register, we are dealing with far more numbers than we have done in the past, and the trend shows that there's more and more people applying to be on the housing register. We're currently at about 13,000. And as you would expect, you can see the number of bids that are being made is flying up as well. So there's been a big increase in the amount of work for the team to continue to administer the housing register so effectively. We currently have a wait time, it's around 18 days, which is seen as really good in this industry for someone once they've made an application to have that assessed and have an outcome sent to them. So just to give a little bit of information of number of homes let. So I said that we've got about 13,000 live applications at the moment. So total properties let to the end of October, you can see there's 523 one beds, 548 two beds, 232 three beds, 27 four beds, and none above 5. So that's just for 2025 up to the end of October, where we have our quarterly information available. And then similarly, using the same number of applications, these are the number of homes that were let in Q2, just to give you an idea. And so again, talking about the trends and the numbers, what this means, which I think the reason I put this slide up is what I think is quite interesting is it's got some information about an average wait time. So the average wait time is only calculated by those who have actually successfully had a property. So there might be some people that could be waiting a lot longer than this time. And obviously the way the averages work, you could have someone who therefore is waiting a lot less than this time. But based on the number of households registered and the number of homes let, there's a very long wait time for a lot of people on the register. I said before about the different bands. You can see the total number that we've got in bronze band versus silver and gold, and then emergency. And the number of properties advertised by area. Thought that would be quite useful to share as well. And then something that I find to be really helpful that I don't think is recognised enough is that you can be housed in any band. So there's often a myth that you have to be gold banded in order to obtain a property through Home Finder, but as you can see from the slides, even in bronze band, you can get a property, and certainly in silver band, over a third of our properties were let to customers in silver band in Q2, just over half in gold band. So that's a real whistle-stop tour of Home Finder Somerset and the administration of the register.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, whistle-stop tour. Yes, you should give lessons to other president. Oh no, I won't go there. Edric, please.
Thank you. Very interesting. So, in relation to how long people spend on the register and emergency accommodation for people who are homeless, how do we explain that I see year on year the same people, homeless people, on the streets, and why have they not been housed? So, please.
Thank you. So essentially, there could be a multitude of reasons why they've not been housed through the register. So when it comes to actually being housed through the register, the offers are made by the landlords and not by ourselves in general fund housing. So the landlords will have their own policies where they are looking at who's come up on a shortlist, and they will make a decision as to whether they'll be offering someone a property. So we don't get involved in general fund housing in the actual offering of a property. We give a shortlist to the landlord and say, here's your highest banded applicants who have been waiting the longest, and in theory they should go through from the top of the list and make sure that they match all the criteria required to be housed. When it comes to people who are rough sleeping, we've got a separate rough sleeping team who work really hard with our rough sleepers, trying to engage some of our rough sleepers. They could, yeah, you're right, they could be living on the streets for a very long time. And I think contrary to belief, it's not really a choice that people make as somewhere where they want to be. So we have a really engaging rough sleeper outreach team who look to work for a long time. It can take a really long time for them to just build any form of trust or relationship with these residents or customers. And their aim is to work with them, engage with them, and eventually develop a strong enough relationship that they are able to help them find somewhere that they can live. So it's a separate team, but they're working incredibly hard all year round to try and make sure that we are reducing our number of rough sleepers in Somerset.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think the rest of my questions are probably more directed towards them. I think you're implying that shut up, talk to me about it and talk to the rest of the team about it. So thanks kindly for putting it that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hazel Price, thank you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Is it right to say that anybody can apply to go on the housing list, and therefore there are probably a lot of people on this huge housing list who are housed adequately but not in something that they want to be? Now that might be that they started off in a 2-bedroom house and then they had several more children, so they are overcrowded and are on the list, or they might have had a merging of families, or they might want to downsize. So I just think I don't get a feel from the list as to the number of people who are urgently needing somewhere, that they are in wholly unsuitable, inadequate accommodation. They may be in private sector rental and want to go into the public sector because it's perceived as cheaper or more secure, and all those kinds of things. And I guess, I suppose, that the need is reflected in those in the gold band. Those are the people who are absolutely totally desperate. Am I right in thinking that? Because I think it's easy for the press to pick up this huge number, but actually that doesn't reflect need in terms of real urgent need. So I'm getting nods, so I think I'm on the right track. So moving forward with the announcements that we're having out of government that no family will be in bed and breakfast for longer than 6 weeks, how is that going to affect our ability? You know, how will that skew this? Will it put more people in gold, or are those families already in gold? Because that's, for me, that's the major concern. Because you know, whilst we would love to be able to provide accommodation for everybody who wants it, that would be, you know, the ideal. It is based on need, and how is that going to move forward in terms of, or is it that we're already making sure that those families are not in bed and breakfast for an extended amount of time, and that we are managing to find, even if it's temporary accommodation where they have their own front door, their own kitchen, their own bathroom? Because to me that's a fundamental for a family. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so essentially you're absolutely right with the way that the banding criteria works. So those who are in bronze band generally are people who are adequately housed, is the term that we use in the policy. So that might be that they live in an area that they'd like to relocate to another part of Somerset, but there's no significant impact of their house on their circumstances, and so they would be seen as being adequately housed. You then go up to moderate impact for people who are in silver band, and then more of a problematic impact for people who are in gold band. And that's why I thought it was useful to share a little bit about the numbers that are in each of those bands. So for gold band, there's 1,133 currently in gold band, and those are people who are needing to move property because there is an impact on them. You would also have some cases of, you mentioned overcrowding. So generally, overcrowding and lacking one bedroom would be in silver band. And like I said, there's still over a third of customers were housed in that band in the last quarter of data. But you can have situations where there's multiple things going on for a family, and so there's a cumulative effect. So if people are struggling with several things, then the likelihood is that they could end up gold banded, and that's all taken into consideration. In terms of the 6 weeks in bed and breakfast, it's been a mandated thing for as far as I can remember with government, that we should have no families in bed and breakfast for longer than 6 weeks, and it is a constant challenge for us in Somerset, especially as private rental costs are so much more than the actual local housing allowance that's available for a lot of these customers. So and also we have the private rental sector market has been squeezed by some great projects in Agritas and Hinckley, where there's lots of other need then for the properties. So it's a big challenge for us in housing and homelessness to try and keep, like you said, our customers having the right facilities and not there then in bed and breakfast where they can't access cooking facilities or communal space, that sort of thing. So we work very hard. We meet weekly to look at who's coming up for those that length of time in bed and breakfast and make sure that they're moved into somewhere that's a lot more appropriate for them. And this year in housing, since the restructure, we've got a new commissioning team who will be working and work to look at other opportunities that we can bring on board that make sure families do have better opportunities in the types of housing that we are commissioning as temporary accommodation. So if someone is made homeless, we're not putting them in B&B straight away, but that hopefully have opportunities where we can put them in some form of self-contained accommodation where they do have the right facilities available to them, whilst we then help them to find a longer term property. So it's a constant challenge, but it's something that the housing officers and the temporary accommodation team are constantly working at all day, every day to make sure that we've got the best outcomes for those customers. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, and really to confirm that there's nothing new coming forward from the government. It is the policy that already exists.
With the 6 weeks.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Yes.
Marcus Krabis, please.
Thank you for the report. Yeah, we could already have a separate meeting on this in itself, I suppose. Couple of specific questions I suppose I have is, obviously you say it's 13,000 applications. I assume that means home finder accounts. But I just wondered what that equated to in numbers of people. Because obviously somebody could have an account, but actually they could have 3 children, etc., and a husband, etc., or wife, etc., or partner, should I say. And then we get back to, I suppose, well, actually, you've got the Home Finder Board, which sets policy, doesn't it, if I'm correct? And I remember mentioning a couple of years ago that there seemed to be no political representation on that board. I wondered whether that had actually changed, whether we did now have, as I said earlier, the buck stops with the elected members, and whether there was actually a political representation on that board to make sure that some of the policies, which have an input on those policies. And the next question, I suppose, is, I'm trying not to go into a big long list, but is one of the issues we have, without being too parochial, is that some of the older stock doesn't necessarily have the 106 agreements that are maybe good would be put in place in today's world, and particularly in my neck of the woods. And actually then we end up with a local needs issue, and then we end up with maybe housing providers moving people in from elsewhere ahead of people who might be argued locally. Now, obviously, Exmoor's trying to address that with their local lettings policy. But what the question is our policies with Home Finder, I don't want to say too rigid, because actually it needs to be rigid to be fair, but are we saying, is there maybe sometimes a little bit of lack of flexibility, or is things like maximum bedroom size, is that a statute thing where obviously we've all probably as division councillors heard stories where someone's not allowed a house because the bedroom's 3 inches too short, and actually that would have solved all sorts of issues. So I'm trying not to go on, but I think I've mentioned a couple of specific points. Thank you.
Thank you. So generally in general fund housing, we do count everything as the household. So I'll have to come back to you with the total number of customers that it affects. So when I talk about around 13,000, that is households. So that could be singles, it could be family, it could be really large family. So I don't have the information to hand, but I can find it. The Home Finder Management and Monitoring Board is a partnership between us and all the registered providers. So that will be made up of, generally the board has to have our biggest landlord providers. So that will be Abri, Live West, Stonewater, Magna, Homes in Somerset, and the HRA team. So it's a partnership, which is why it doesn't have a political representation. In terms of the older stock not having section 106 and local letting plans, I don't know the answer to the query, but you're right in that section 106 and locals letting plans, they are more and more common, and that does mean that a certain percentage of properties is therefore allocated to by the landlord who govern that to local customers. In terms of Home Finder policy, the policy dictates, I think it's you have to be 2 years, I can't remember off the top of my head, living in Somerset in order to qualify to be on the register, although there's a couple of things that sit outside of that. For example, people who are fleeing domestic abuse situations and certain care leavers can still be accepted onto the register. Doesn't necessarily mean that they will get housed quicker because of the whole banding criteria, but it does mean that they can be accepted onto the register. So generally it will be people who have got a local connection to Somerset.
Very quickly, please.
I don't know whether it's probably not, if it's not for you, it's just there, but we talk about housing benefit, and obviously a lot of housing benefit gets paid to tenants, but I presume there's housing benefit that gets paid to private landlords. Do we have a figure for how much this council, well, what I'd like to know somewhere along the line is how much housing benefit goes to people in private let accommodation, if we've got that figure somewhere.
That will be for the revenues and welfare team from their housing benefit figures. We will have a figure somewhere, but that's not for us, unfortunately.
Okay, well, perhaps we can ask someone to chase that up for us. I think that'd be quite interesting. Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee Redmond, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kravis picked up one of the points I was going to talk about, which was around how many partners or housing associations was included. That I might come back to that in a second, but I thank you for this. Is really interesting, and the fact that the guide to Home Finder is included. I've had a look at it myself, and I think it's quite concise and quite informative. And I would recommend any councillors would save the link, because it's something that you'll need relatively often in in the work you do. But mine was more a matter of how we can make our comms a little bit better. Is there such a thing as a myth buster available? Is it an A4 sheet that answers some of the questions? Because some of the points you made around the number of people that in bronze that are still getting accommodation, the fact that they're, but also highlighting the number of people we have on the system is also useful, because it's quite often people will challenge us as local councillors about it, and I think that, and what I was going to then add on to that is it might be helpful if included in that mythbuster is the number of properties that are available across the whole system, and then a breakdown of the association, the housing association, our partners that provide them as well. So I think that would be a useful thing as well, Chair. But otherwise, thank you for the report. It's really helpful, and I would suggest, if Democratic Services haven't already picked up, Chair, you might want to signpost them to this for a briefing note of some sort. I know we have an members information sheet, so that it's on the system for that, and I'm sure that someone from Democratic Services will tell me in a minute that it already went through about 3 months ago, but I just had that one too. But thank you for the report, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there are some good suggestions in there. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak? No? Okay, well, I'll sum up and thank Sam for your comprehensive report and concise report. Clearly, this is a very important area for the council, but I can't help thinking that it's the understanding or comprehension of it is not universal. And I think certainly, as Councillor Redmond points out, a myth buster for all councillors to say that it's 13,000 on the list at the moment. We get through about 10%. We let about 10% every year. Will be very helpful. And of course, the point that the bronze band doesn't mean you're beyond the pale, that you still have a chance. And I think, what was it, 30% of silver band get through. So that's very encouraging. Also, I take Councillor Cravis's point that it may not be for you, but it would be quite interesting to know what the balance is between the private landlords and the public and ourselves and the various locations. Of course, we know that, shall we say, council houses are based very much in the Taunton Deane area and the old Sedgemoor area, and the council has ambitions to increase provision beyond that. But of course, it's not going to happen overnight. Will take time, but it is coming. But in the meantime, there are housing associations out there who are part of this partnership, so everybody has a chance. I think the question I was going to ask, and apologies if I've missed it or if it's in the report, but if we have 13,000 on the list, I mean, there must be a degree of churn of people coming on who either move away or just find alternative accommodation and come on. And I didn't get a sense of what the turnover is because 10%, you'd be on the list for 10 years before you got a house. But I mean, I don't think it doesn't work like that. I don't think. That was my final point. But and just to say thank you very much.
Yeah, there are people that there is an element of churn on the register. I couldn't tell you number off the top of my head, but people will get higher banding as an incentive, for example, if they are looking to downsize. So if we can encourage people to downsize and free up the properties for customers who have the larger families and need it, so that creates an element of churn. But yeah, there'll be reason for people to churn within the register.
Yeah, I think things like that in the Mythbuster would be very, very helpful.
I'll get something shared around.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, if there are no other questions, just thank you very much for your report, and we'll.
Good morning, councillors. I'm Stephen Boland. I'm a tenancy specialist within the Landlord Housing Service. In the previous report, the presentation provided you with some insight into the current housing demand in Somerset. This report will provide you with some data, a few data tables around who's been allocated the council housing, the new council housing at Seawood Way in Minehead. This is where the council has built 54 new council homes. Within the report, I've included a reference, and it's reference only, to previous reports where the council has made approvals for the new development in Minehead. So in terms of the allocations process, applicants on Home Finder Somerset placed a bid. We did some promotion and publicity around the scheme in Minehead, and they placed a bid. There were hundreds of bids for the development in Minehead, and it's fair to say from the data tables, the first data table, it's fair to say that it's the residents of Minehead that have been allocated the properties at Seawood Way. That was the intention of the local lettings plan, that's the preference group that was highlighted within the local lettings plan. So you can see that the vast majority, almost 9 out of 10 of the allocations of the 54 allocations were made to people from Minehead or living in residents of Minehead. The remaining 10% were those with a strong connection with Minehead, so it may well be that they were employed or unemployed in the Minehead area. 126 people have been accommodated at the scheme in total. Of the allocations that were made, 26 of the applicants were gold banded. And then you can see within the data table that there are also applicants from silver band and bronze band allocated properties. There are 3 specifically adapted properties within the scheme, and I can say that all 3 of those adapted homes were allocated to people that had the need. Okay. Finally, I think the development is a good example of the council delivering quality homes. They're built to a really good standard, and I think it's gone some way towards helping meet the local need in Minehead. Thank you.
Thanks. I think it's fair to say that when you make a housing needs assessment, you tend to get, shall we say, over demand, and so therefore, you get a lot of people putting forward when in actual fact, the real core demand is lower. Do you get a sense of what percentage that is? I mean, because you're always going to put somebody, flying a kite or just putting a speculative bid. But is there a sort of accepted number from any that you would say that these people really are in need, sort of, because that dictates how many houses you build. So if you've got sort of 100 people on the housing list, you wouldn't build 100 houses because you probably wouldn't fill them with that number, but you might fill 20 to 30. Do you work on that kind of sort of basis?
I think when we, certainly within the Minehead area, we were looking at the site and what the capacity of build was being capable of being delivered on the site. And then in terms of, and obviously the scheme has got to be viable in terms of the number of units and in terms of affordability as well, in what the rents will be charged to build a scheme out. But in terms of demand, yeah, there were lots of bids placed for each. We advertised the properties on Home Finder. There were lots of bids. I don't have the data to hand, but we can provide that information. But yeah, there were lots of bids placed, and then they're ranked according to their banding and status, taking into account the local lettings plan preferences. Yeah,
it's been alluded to from a councillor point of view that if there is over provision, which occasionally happens, then of course you let to people from outside the area, which it causes, and inevitably these things fuel sort of rumours and myths, which aren't very helpful. So it is always useful to know at what level of the demand we're trying to pitch our building. Edric.
Thank you. 126 people in 54 houses. That's about average in it for occupancy, even when it comes to new builds. Anyway, did you manage to match all the people to the number of bedrooms in each property? In relation to, is there any capacity, or did you manage to sort of mash everybody up so every room is filled, would be my question. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. It's just that some of the rooms are two-person rooms, and one person's occupying that room.
Thank you.
Okay, Marcus Kravis, please.
Me already, yeah. I think on that point, actually, I mean, there are lots of conversations I had with people who, obviously minimum bedroom size and things stop them from, where we got 6 people living in where, especially when families have come together. and those issues, and that's something that's maybe not for this one. That's something that needs to how do we address that, because actually it would have freed up another house as well. And although they're willing to share, suddenly the rigidity of the policy means that no, you're not allowed to, or your kids aren't allowed to, and actually so then they're again even more poorly housed until they wait for something more suitable. Yeah, thank you for that, and obviously and well done with Seaward Way, because that can't have been an easy one for everybody involved, and I'm proud that there's not much. I wouldn't say there's too much I'm proud of being a councillor, but that Seaward Way being built by this council was something I think we can all be very proud of, and I think indeed you touched on there the fact that it's 54 houses, and I think originally it was 44 or something like that. So, and it got done quicker rather than if it had been left to others to do it in with their West Somerset way, so to speak. I think my question, or a couple of questions, is one, are there any lessons to be learned? And I think I've harped on again, is that I think the 106 agreement for this site, which again was down to planning, was for Minehead and the neighbouring parish, which of course in West Somerset means that you can have a neighbouring parish in between, where actually people in, for those who don't know the geography, people in the parish of Carhampton, which most people would think is just outside Minehead, actually isn't the neighbouring parish because there's Dunster in between. Although there's, so it's how, are the lessons to be learned from planning for the 106 agreements when we start talking about local lettings, but are there any other lessons to be learned? I assume there's the definition of outside the area, but I think that was probably touched on elsewhere. One of the things that stands out for me though is, and we talk about gold, silver, bronze, but I think on the previous report the bronze was 7% of all the houses let were bronze, where in this one in Seaward Way it's 28%, which is quite a big differential, and I wonder if there's any specific reason for that, or was it the rigidity of the 106 agreement which maybe caused that? And I suppose the other question, well, I've got two questions. One other question, I suppose. The main question is, how many times over could we have let these houses? I mean, obviously they're being zero carbon, they cost the council a lot of money to build, but I presume they've got lower running costs and, I should think the people's bills would be lower, but I suppose does that get affected in rents and things? So how many times could we have let these houses? And there's just one silly one here I got, and properties let to successful applicants who describe themselves in work. Some would describe that I'm not in work, but it's a silly question, but they're either in work or not, and I just wondered how that works. I think that's it actually. And again, it's good to see the figures. I think it was me that called for this report. It's nice to see it finally come. And I'm assuming there will be churn in this site. And do we envisage, have there been any, well, I suppose it's a question to ask now actually, although it's very short, we're young in its stage, have we already had tenants move out, and have there been, I don't want to, an equal amount of excessive applications for each one of those houses? I think I've got everything I wanted to ask.
Okay, thank you. It is early days. We've not had any churn yet with no transfers out to date. In terms of lessons learned, I think originally the demand on the West Somerset register was around 400 plus 420 plus applicants registered in that area. What we did find towards the end of the allocations process was that the flats were becoming more challenging, if you like, to let. And that's where we've seen the number of bronze band applicants being rehoused. So we've got this local lettings plan where we're giving preference to residents of Minehead. And within the scheme, I think 30 plus flats. And it was becoming more of a challenge to allocate the flats, is what I'll say. So we just need to be mindful of oversupply, I think, there. I think the other challenges might have been around the development itself, not my specific area, but certainly attracting subcontractors to the area. The main contractor, in fact, subcontractors was challenging, I think, at times, given the location, the remoteness. And then the other issue, I think it's a national issue as well, was about materials, obtaining materials, and that, especially around some issues relating to balconies on some of the flat blocks. It was a challenge there. I'm not a specialist in that area. I'm not that close to the development team, but that's what they've shared with me around the challenge around subcontractors and then materials. But I don't think we're unique in that. I think that's generally the case. And the working. So yeah, and it's just whether or not we asked residents, applicants, whether or not they were in work, whether part-time, full-time, or in receipt of welfare benefits. It's just an indicator that we were interested in obtaining. And there's a balance there around people who are either in work or on benefits.
Okay, thank you. Andy Kendall, please.
All right, just carry on from Councillor Crabbs's talking to you. Majesty's Forces, Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines coming out. Do they hold much weight on your list? Or sorry, what's your answer to them when they come and put themselves onto what possibly would be a gold band coming out of their careers? In theory, your question about do they work? Well, of course they don't work no more, do they? They're coming out, but do they hold much ground with you?
So there is recognition within the Home Finder Somerset policy, and Sam might be better placed than me to refer to that. But there is reference to ex-forces or current serving officers. I'm not quite sure what the banding criteria is. I'm just giving Sam a little while to trace through the Home Finder Somerset policy, but I haven't got the data. I don't know. I haven't got the data to hand. I can find out whether or not any properties were allocated to ex-forces personnel within the Minehead scheme. But I do know that they do get recognition with regards to Home Finder Somerset policy.
I'll have to come back to you, Councillor Kennell.
Okay, if there are no other councillors, very quickly then, please.
Sorry, Chair, just about getting back those bronze things and the issues with the flats, and obviously, I mean, I suppose it's probably about the demographics of how few flats there are compared to maybe elsewhere in urban areas. People are more used to, the opportunities flats. I know coming from where I come from, why would you have a flat when you can, there's rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of terrace housing with, which is probably cheaper in that area. So it'd be nice to have, I don't know, I'll probably take it offline, but delve more deeply into those figures about where the bonds came from and the flats. And obviously people, young families being reluctant to want to live in a flat, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak with you off stage on that.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you for bringing the report, Stephen. We've been waiting for this, or Councillor Cravis requested this some time ago, so it's very nice to get in front of us. It strikes me that the whole scheme has been pretty much a success. One question I was going to have to ask, I mean, it's on the back of the lessons learned thing, but apart from the North Taunton redevelopment, do you know when the last major council house development was done in this county? It must have been years and years ago. Certainly.
And the council, Taunton Deanborough Council we built out Creechbarrow Road. I mean, that was 50 plus properties with Nightstone Housing Association at the time. That was around about 2017, I think, 2017, 18, but significant. We weren't in a position to be able to build in any meaningful way for many years. But it would be a significant period of time, 30 years plus, I would have thought.
Because we've done redevelopments, but it's just this is a brand new site or a brand new site, isn't it? I see Councillor Redmond is waving at me.
Just a quick point you may want to, Bridgewater's been lucky enough to benefit from the Hinkley C funds that were able to be used to pump prime a lot of our housing association developments in the area. So there has been a lots of small pockets of affordable homes built in and around the Bridgewater area, and hopefully with the uplift that's currently being negotiated, there is an opportunity with the Hinkley Point workers going turning into nearly 15,000 from an original expectation of 5,600, that we might be able to use the money a bit better to impact mitigation to build that out a bit more.
Indeed. Oh, Councillor Cravis, one more.
Well,
Okay.
I'm sort of going to highlight what Lee just said there, and let's not underestimate the work that the housing associations do with a lot of small sites, in particular both Bridgewater and West Somerset. But I think what stood out for this was a large site, and I think that's where maybe a way for be shot down by the housing associations by email. But there's a lot of small sites they do, but this was a big site, and I think that's that might end up falling to us in the future as the ones who can provide a big site, because we've got maybe a bit more financial resilience.
Yeah, I think that was the point I was trying to make. I mean, this is a substantial site, 50 plus properties, so it is well worth doing. And as I say, it seems to have been a fantastic success. So congratulations. Thank you very much for the report. Now, I've had a request for a break. So if we can reconvene at midday, please, and then we'll go on to the budget proposals. Right, back online, everybody. Thank you. Useful little break. Right, we now move on to item 9, which are the budget proposals for 26-27 to 30-31. And Christian Evans will provide us with an update on those and the update on the fees and charges policy, please. And then we'll have some questions. Christian.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. We do have a few slides just to run along the papers. So the initial budget proposals paper 26-27 was submitted to Executive Committee last Wednesday. All of the recommendations were agreed. The 26-27 budget consultation was also opened at that point. The paper has also been submitted to Climate and Place Scrutiny and Corporate Resources Scrutiny Committee last Friday. As an overview of the current situation on the budget as we know it, in summary, there are still a lot of moving parts at this stage. Clive Heafy, as Section 151 officer, has to submit a non-binding request to MHCLG before the 12th of December with regard to further exceptional financial support. All councils in this position have to do so, even though we don't actually know what the settlement is at this point. The final settlement from government is due in the week beginning the 15th of December, more likely to be probably the 17th or 18th of December. We are not going to close the gap in 26-27, but we are continuing to work with services to close the gap as much as possible right up to budget setting. The objective is to reduce the request for EFS from the government, including rolling over some of the EFS relating to transformation. As you will be aware, we have appointed a transformation partner in Newton. They are due to report back on their initial proposals for transformation. Although there are still some transformation savings expected in 26-27, the majority of savings will be from 27-28 onwards. We know that the government has said that it will take on the SEND costs from the 28-29, but the councils will then need to recognise all the accumulated dedicated schools grant deficit to that point. If that happens without help, the Section 151 officer would issue a Section 114 notice, along with a number of other authorities who would be in exactly the same situation. Again, we are waiting for the detail from the government as to how exactly this proposal would work. The new proposed council tax mansion tax will be passported back to central government after direct cost of collection. Again, we are waiting further details. In summary, the budget is still very uncertain at this stage until we receive clarity on the fair funding settlement. For context, 25-26 Q2 budget monitoring forecast shows a forecast service overspend of 7.205 million. The overspend is being offset by the underspend in the non-service budgets, leaving a net forecast overspend at this stage of 727,000. Without the £43 million EFS, that would show that this council is forecasting an overspend of 43.727 million in 25-26. If we can underspend, then we could reduce the EFS requirement. On the papers themselves, you can see from the slide there, so the paper shows the current revised budget gap for 26-27 is 73.367 million. The majority of the proposed savings for 26-27 are coming from adults and housing at 13.354 million. For a reference, Community, Place and Economy are proposing savings of 2.432 million. Detailed savings proposals are shown in Appendix A. The total growth requests at this stage are 43.403 million. That is considerable. The majority of these requests are from the People Services for Demand and Demography, as you could probably well imagine. Detailed growth requests are not included in the paper at this stage. They are still being worked on to try and bring these down and obviously provide further mitigations. With regards to the fees and charges, we have worked with a partner who has extensive local government experience and a track record of helping local authorities optimise income through working with services and using valuable tools such as benchmarking. They also assisted in the creation of the fees and charge policy shown in Appendix C. Standard uplift for fees and charges by default for 26-27 is 3.8%. This is the CPI from September. An important note, car parking, highways and waste fees and charges will be reported in future reports. The full fees and charges schedule, which is quite long, is shown in Appendix B. Slide. As I've said, Executive Committee opened the budget consultation last Wednesday. Scrutiny is asked to offer helpful feedback and highlight areas of further consultation, reflect on the impact of each proposal and suggest any further proposals. For the next steps, all comments and feedback will be fed into the Corporate and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 5th of January, where all members are invited to attend. Corporate and Resources Scrutiny will also meet on the 28th of January. This meeting provides an opportunity for the committee to consider feedback from the budget consultation, outcome of the provisional settlement due the week beginning 15th, as I've already mentioned. They will provide feedback and recommendations to Executive Committee on the 11th of February, ahead of full council on the 25th of February. If it's okay, Chair, could I pass the baton on to Councillor Lyshan, who might want to add on any additional points?
Yes, certainly, by all means. Councillor Layton.
Thank you, Chair. I don't need to add very much. Mr. Evans has covered all of the points that I would want to make. I'd just like to say that I do welcome us having a fees and charges policy for the first time. And also, if anybody thinks that it seems the wrong way that we have to submit a non-binding application for exceptional financial support before we have the provisional settlement, I completely agree with you, but there's absolutely nothing we can do about that. And there are three areas where I am particularly concerned in what's coming to us from government. One is the fair funding review and therefore the grants that this council will receive. Secondly is business rates. And thirdly, that accumulated DSG deficit, and actually exactly what councils are expected to do to be able to cope with that situation, because it affects many, many councils, though not all. And so government need to do something that takes into account the fact that it's for some councils that deficit is large or huge, and for other councils it's not. It's a very varied picture. So Chair, I'm here to help with any of the questions if I can, but I'm sure Christian and Penny Gower will be able to help a lot more than I can on the technicalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the first observation I would make is that the list of savings under Community, Place and Economy is of course an amalgamation of the work of two current scrutiny committees. And my first glance says that actually not many of them come into the old, what was currently the communities. So things like highway lighting was Economy and Place, and things like that. So a lot of them are coming from the other scrutiny committee, but I'm assuming this report has also gone to that committee as well. I think in a way that just indicates how much the broad community's agenda has been pretty much hollowed out. There's nothing left to find, unless Mr. Hall has been rummaging around the back of County Hall trying to find it. And you know, even then, you know, in the grand scheme of things, the savings are what, £2 million, which are nonetheless welcome, I'm sure, but they're nonetheless relatively modest. And I think this is one of the things, the overall aspects of the financial situation that really bothers me is that, you know, a lot of the services we provide for the wider community are the ones that are perhaps being regarded as lower hanging fruit or easier to cut. And the statutory responsibilities are the ones that we are having to prioritise, which is, you know, from a broad-based council with, I don't know how many people live in Somerset, 300,000 or something, is 650 is of considerable concern. I hadn't actually picked up that the business, the so-called mansion tax, was all going to go back to government either. But then again, I'm perhaps not terribly surprised. Anyway, thank you very much for this, Christian. Are there any questions? Councillor Pryor-Sankey, please.
Thank you. In the fees and charges list, which I think was death by ModGov, if I could say so. But I did spot, and I'm really struggling to see it today, I did spot a thing about the green waste bins, and it said that a £20 charge will be made for new customers. So the question I have is, what about all those people out there who still have their green bin and have not subscribed for a little while but want to resubscribe? Will they have to pay a £20 fee for having a new bin that they don't need? So if they can demonstrate they still have their council bin, will they be charged £20 fee?
No, they will not. So if they have a container that is from Somerset Council or the predecessor authorities and is still in good enough condition, then no, absolutely not.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Cravis? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Another chair ended up raising his eyes at the other day. I put my hand up. Hello, Christian, again. I think this is it's a bit like Groundhog Day. This is the third time I think I've heard this report in the last few days, and I've got it again this afternoon. So I'll hold my question. Well, actually, it's probably a couple of questions, because obviously Liz has already mentioned the mind-boggling lunacy of having to put in stuff before the government then tells you what you're going to get, and the fact that we've actually got opportunity, I suppose, later to look at this. And one of the things that was talked about in corporate resources the other day was the fact that Scrutiny could deep dive into these figures. But of course, you know, you could have a meeting when are we deep diving into individual fees? Because I mean, as Hazel just pointed out, well, I mean, there's an awful lot that say community and place by them. But on the fees policy, that is a good thing. And I asked the question the other day, and I think it sort of ended with me suggesting that fees never go down. They only ever go up when they get reviewed. But then actually, to be fair, there's an awful lot that don't go up at all. And so therefore, the question is, I don't know if fiscal drag is the right thing, but of course, if a fee is hypothetically £250 1 year and it hasn't gone up for 4 or 5 years, well, actually, how are we missing inflation? Is inflation not taking effect, or how do we deal with that? So I think I'm trying to think exactly what my question was at corporate and resources the other day, but it was basically around, obviously, sorry, Chair, it was basically around, we've got less officers doing some stuff, some of the budgets are smaller, so how are the fees staying the same? Because assuming that the fees always, the amount of work that goes into producing those fees is still the same, whether you got as many officers doing it or not. But I suppose it's how are we looking at that inflationary control on those fees? I think is my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so
yes, you might as well.
This is, so we've had an external partner come in who's got extensive local government experience, and they've looked through our current fees schedule before we produced all of this. So they looked, compared, benchmarked, worked with services. So there's been basically, alongside the new strategy, there's been a full review of all of the fees and charges across the council, including obviously the smaller teams and so on. But so that's
provoked it. I suppose this, and obviously we've brought a lot of the fees and charges together from the legacy authorities and so on. So that's why we've had a full review, including getting an external partner to help us along with it, to look at the level. We've looked at the budget we've already got. So if the budget is already ambitious, then the fees may well not have gone up. So yeah, there's been a lot of detail and a lot of work gone into this. So yeah, but generally we will optimise where possible, and that includes the standard increase of 3.8%, which was the September CPI figure. But yeah, there has been a full review across all the services. A lot of work has gone into this fees and charges schedule.
The second question?
My second question was on the fees and charges. Therefore, there's pages of building control ones, which sort of hark me back to the old building control board, and which actually I think was quite, I don't want to use the word, it was very good at cost recovery. But I wonder, how does that now get looked at? Because that was a big chunk of fees and charges and income, should I say? And how does that now get looked at? Because obviously there's no board, or it's just something I don't know about and I've missed. It's more of a point of information, really.
Yes, Chris, please.
Yeah, so there previously has been a building control board, mainly because it was a partnership for a number of years, and we all joined forces as districts to create a single partnership. So there was a board with member representation to help oversee that. The fees and charges for building control are largely made up of two elements. Effectively, there's one element that's set for cost recovery only, where we are applying retrospective building control mechanisms and I think some of the enforcement. And then there is an element where we have complete discretion as a council to set the fees and charges, so long as we are market competitive, because that's an element that you can get an approved inspector to undertake that work on your behalf. You don't have to, you don't have to come to the council. But that board no longer exists on the basis that we are now operating as one.
So I suppose as a follow-on point to that is the political oversight of that falls to the portfolio holder. Is that right?
Yes, much like a range of services. Yeah, lead member and then the relevant scrutiny committee.
I mean, one of the things that I took away from this is I'm very glad to hear that there's been a comprehensive review, because as Councillor Cravis has pointed out, quite a lot of the fees, and I seem to notice in relation to the hospitality sector, don't seem to have gone up, which I'm sure would be welcomed, although some of the sums are relatively small, but it's a welcome development, and the rest have gone up with inflation. So I mean, overall, I think certainly as far as I can see, most of the charges are fairly reasonable. One thing that did strike out, I mean, you may not know this, but one of my first jobs was working in environmental health, and one of my jobs was going out and putting notices on abandoned vehicles. Now, I don't think we ever charged for that in the moment, unless we could find the owner of the vehicle. And I see that we got quite substantial charges associated with the removal and disposal of the vehicle. But given that if it's abandoned, the prospects of finding its legal owner are, shall we say, limited. Is there, what am I trying to say is there more of a cost to the authority than a cost recovery in this area? And I suspect this is one for Chris rather than Christian. But it's in there. It's substantial amounts of money as a fee to charge. Of course, you can only charge it if you can find who it belonged to.
Yeah, it's an interesting point with abandoned vehicles, because there is no definition of abandoned. If you do your research online, you'll find there's no definition, and therefore the council has to determine abandonment using a variety of mechanisms. So can we find an owner? Is it taxed? Is there any obvious movement of the vehicle, etc.? So the council will have to determine if it considers it to be abandoned, serve the due notices, but if obviously an owner is not traceable, then we have no ability to recover the cost. What we're also finding is that vehicles are abandoned quite frequently with large amounts of rubbish inside of them, and that rubbish has to be removed and separated. And similarly, we have issues with caravans, which are very expensive to dispose of. The complexity of their construction means they have to be stripped apart, and making them disproportionately expensive to dispose of, whereas vehicles tend to have an intrinsic value in terms of their metal weight. But yeah, the ability to recover is very, very difficult with abandoned vehicles.
Edric?
It's just better asked. I think Chris almost answered it. Say a scrap car is worth 150 to 200 quid. So does that go back in the pot to offset the cost? I guess it does. Yeah.
It does.
Hazel Prasanki, please.
Thank you. I don't know if it's still there, but I have a persistent issue with an abandoned car. Can you send me the name of the person to whom I can send the details? If when I go home, I look at it and see whether it has gone or not. It was something to do with, well, we know who the owner is, and it's actually on a highway, the Verges Highway, and therefore we can't take action, whatever. And this rotting, filled with rubbish vehicle has been there for years, and unless it's moved in the last few months, I just would like a contact of the right person to try and move this forward, because everybody's irritated by it. Thanks. If you just ping me an email.
Thanks. I'm sure we can sort that out. Yes, it used to be quite. Now you can search for a registration online. It makes life a little bit easier rather than we have to wait 7 or 10 days for the DVLA to come back. Real pain. Andy Kendall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from that, I have one in my ward. It's a yellow van. We had the registration number. It's not taxed. It's not MOT'd. When you go through all the reporting now, you end up reporting to the police, but like the police say, we can only stop it and do anything if he's driving it. Well, they're not going to put a sneaky peekies out 24 hours a day, are they? So this guy can still drive his van around whenever he wants. I'm just
that doesn't sound as if it meet the criteria of being abandoned, because I think it has to be in the same location and basically not drivable or taxed. If it's taxed and insured, you can't touch it. That's the problem.
Yeah, the only reason I bring it up because we were talking about this. Your conversation went to the tax and insurance. You can check all this. Well, you can check all this, but there's lots of criteria that stops things happening.
Okay, well, we're drifting away from the budget, and we can probably have another meeting on abandoned vehicles and environmental health enforcement. But I suspect it would be quite useful if the contact could be shared with us, because these things do pop up from time to time. Right, back in the room. Are there any questions for Christian about the budget and the fees and charges? I think in terms of comments from this committee, there's not an awful lot we can say in terms of the savings that are proposed. I get the sense that the new charges put forward are broadly acceptable to members here, mainly because of the inflationary thing, which is standard across the board. And I think I'll leave our comments at that. So unless there are any other questions or queries urgently, we will move on to the last item on the agenda, which is our forward plan or the work programme. Now disappeared. Yeah. And you will see that our next meeting is on the 5th of February. And we will be looking at the housing landlord service options appraisal. And this is, I think, there have been 1 or 2 briefings on this as to how housing landlord services will be delivered in future. And Chris and Andrew Pulsford will no doubt take us through that. We will be having the long-awaited annual report from Federica Smith-Roberts, who is our lead member for communities, housing, etc. And then we need to plan forward. We've got two more meetings after that, and we have various things that are on the list. And I think there's been quite a strong requests for something on gypsy and travellers issues, so I will be pressing for something to come forward on that. Air quality, I think, has also been raised. There are items to be added, as well as updates. I think we got another update on the Octagon, just to make sure that's on track, which I think would be very important. Particularly, I think it was the planning is due to be given in February or March or something, so I would keep an eye on that one. And I think with the topics we have here, that should give us, if we can bring reports forward, that should give us enough for the last 2. Councillor Reid, did you? Oh, you just. So unless anybody else has an issue that is particularly burning a hole, because I think if it does, it's likely to have to be passed on to the new committee for climate, place and communities. So on that note, I'm proposing to close the meeting. And thank you all and for all the presenters for their time and trouble, and get home safely. And oh, a final word of thanks to Hazel for the cakes. And so we're being encouraged to take some home with us. Thank you. And of course, finally, wish you all a very, very happy Christmas and New Year for those I don't see. And see you all again on the 5th of February.
Thanks, Chair.